Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Attract and Stand Out podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Holly, and I am so excited for today's conversation. And we're going to have a surprise for you today. So definitely keep listening because I have on the call with me Diane Allen. Welcome to the show, Diane.
Thank you so much for having me, Darlene.
Yeah, I am so excited to have you on today. Before we dive too far into conversation, I want to make sure people know who you are. Can you tell us just a little bit about you and your background and the work that you do?
Yeah, happy to. I'm a classically trained violinist. I had a full career as a violinist. I was the lead violinist, the concertmaster of an orchestra for 15 years. I taught violin students for over 28 years. I've been self-employed my entire adult life, just to put that out there. But at this point, I am a keynote speaker. And what I do is I talk about how can you get into your work and your life like a musician gets into the music.
Mm.
And there's when a musician is getting into the music, imagine if you're, at a concert and the musician is just going through the motions, right? People don't want that. They want that transcendence feeling of when you see a musician get into the music, because then it transfers into you. And you end up getting into it as well. And so a musician's version of getting into the music is getting into the flow state. And so I am a global authority on flow state, and I have a lot of information for people today to like really make the most out of it and how it helps you to attract and stand out in your own unique way.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Like one of the things that I struggled with early in entrepreneurship, especially, but even if I think back to like when I was in my career in retail management and different things, was finding that flow. Like, how do we find a way to show up every single day and feel like we're in flow? And it doesn't have to be hard. Like, we don't have to do hard things. We don't have to make it more difficult. Life can be difficult enough sometimes. Like, we don't need to add to that piece. So I'm excited to just dive into that conversation of flow. So when you think of like a flow state. Can you talk us through a little bit about what that looks like, especially because you're you're doing it through like like as a violinist? Like
Yes.
it's gotta be like I can remember seeing people play the violin and like you can just tell when they drop into their body. And I know like we use our voices a lot. I talk about like embodying our voice and trusting our voice and stepping into who we are. I'd love to hear like what's your version of it when it comes to that piece.
Oh, such a simple question to answer. No, I'm just joking. Um, really, like a second before you asked the question, you said something really profound. You said work shouldn't have to be, what did you say? Hard?
Hard. Yeah.
Or there was another word you used. The thing is that that shows me that you already know the key indicators of being in flow. So let's just start there. First of all, what is the flow state? It's an optimal state of mind when you feel your best and you perform your best. It falls under the umbrella of positive psychology, which is all about taking a look at what's working well, reverse engineering it so that you can create more of that goodness in your life. And so there's actually neuroscience. It's been studied that when people are in flow, there's a group of peak performance hormones that are released into that create these brain waves that make your brain conducive to being in flow. And what happens is that the neocortex amps up, dramatically increasing learning speed. The prefrontal cortex temporarily shuts down and basically quiets your inner critic and your fight or flight response. That means no fear or negative self-talk getting in your way. It's amazing. um, and then these peak performance hormones that get released are anandamide, endorphins, dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. And because of this, we experience euphoria, motivation, peak performance, and happiness all at the same time. So, how do you know when you're in flow? It's what you just said. You lose sense of time because you just love what you're doing. You lose a sense of yourself. That's when that inner critic and your fear is just, you feel uninhibited because fear is gone. Ideas and insights come in from out of the blue, kind of like a shower moment, when that happens.
Yeah.
Or like me at 5 in the morning, I just woke up and like had these ideas pour in this morning.
Perfect.
um, And then other key indicators are things coming together with a sense of ease. Darlene, have you ever gotten more done in 30 minutes than you had in the last 3 days?
No, absolutely.
Yeah, that, right?
Hmm.
That's an indication that you're in flow. Then there's this positive feedback loop where the more you get into your work, the more you get out of it. And so during the pandemic, organizational psychologist Adam Grant wrote an article on this very topic. And in it, he talked about the mental health spectrum and how halfway between depression and flourishing, there's this midway point where you're fine, but you're not fine. You're functional, but you can't get motivated. You're just kind of blah. So the word for that he coined was languishing. And according to Adam Grant, the key to go from languishing to flourishing is to get into your flow state. So that's it in a nutshell. And my work is just making it accessible to everyone. I think that most people think that, first of all, we're all wired for it, but most people think, oh, that's just for musicians or athletes, right? That's for artists and writers. No, we're all wired for this. And so helping everybody to tap into their flow and experience all of those like amazing benefits that I just talked about, that's what we're talking about here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you remember like that first time that you got into your flow as a violinist and like what that looked like for you? Like, do you have like a moment that you kind of remember going there?
That's so interesting that you asked that question because when I think everybody has a very vivid memory of a time when they were in flow. You know, when I described those key indicators, I think some people just now thought, I didn't know there was a name for that. Um, so so there's one that I have a lot of different memories. For example, I have a very early memory. My family, I don't know, we were kind of noisy and loud, and there was a lot of power struggle in the household. It wasn't like the most loving environment.
Wasn't
Um,
a flowy home vibe?
it is not a flowy, it was more knees and elbows. But
Hmm.
that said, I do remember very vividly that, I don't know, we were all packed in the car coming home from something. It was nighttime in the winter, and the snow was really packable. And we just had this group flow experience where we had the best time making this enormous snowman that turned into a Native American man with like the gorgeous long headdress and everything. It was like spectacular. We were so in sync, and you do this, and how about this? And I have this idea. And it was like this like group flow brainstorming innovative experience that was just like the kind of stuff that you see like on when everything's going wrong with Apollo 13, and you see all the scientists like, how are we going to solve this? And all of a sudden they're pulling all these ideas, right? If you think of that scene in the movie, um, that's what we were doing. The only problem is that the next morning when we woke up, it was too warm and it was like 2 feet high and smushed, and nobody got to see it the way we did. But I do want to share with you, when I was 15, I had been playing violin since I was 8. And I remember being in my room, blasting the music. No, not rock and roll. I'm listening to a violin concerto. And in my imagination, it was as if I was the soloist. I was imagining standing on stage, pouring the core of my soul into every note I play. And I've always wondered, why do I remember that? All these years later, why would I remember that?
You were in flow.
Why would I remember that? I'll circle back to that later. Do you remember a time when you were in flow? Like really vivid?
That's a good question to throw back at me. I was trying, I actually, as I was asking you the question, I was like, when can I think, like, what's like the furthest memory back I can think of when I was in flow? And I think part of it, I think it took me a while to find what flow was, because I know, like, as I started my business 18 years ago, even, I was trying to figure out, like, how do I go into like a flow state for my business? Because I felt like I was trying to do things the hard way. I like to, my mom used to say I like to learn things the hard way. Like, I usually have to do it. I tried a couple ways, see what happens. And one of the things that really dropped in for me was when I actually showed up as my true self. And so I work a lot with my clients now on whether they're entrepreneurs or the leaders inside of organizations, like how do we identify how we want to show up and
Yeah.
not try to do what we think we're supposed to do because, we're watching other people and we're like, oh, so and so leads this way, or this entrepreneur is marketing their business in this way. And so we try to do what everybody else is doing. And
Mm,
I think one of the secrets for that I found for myself and that I now work with my clients on is like, what's your way? How do we like trust your gut and your intuition and really identify like what those unique things are about you that allow you to show up and really get into that flow state and be able to show up in an authentic way that feels good and feels in alignment with how you want to show up. And so I think part of like for me, like the first time that happened was probably like 2 years into my business. I
hmm
had been a business coach for 2 years. I had purchased a franchise. I had all the tools and the resources, but everything that they taught me felt out of alignment. I did not,
mm,
I, I felt salesy and icky and slimy and gross, kind of like the poor car salesman, like that car salesman vibe is what I was taught, but it didn't line up with who I was. And so I was really struggling with I had clients, but it was inconsistent. And I remember walking away from the franchise about that point because I was like, this isn't working. This doesn't feel like me. And I really had to pivot myself and identify like what pieces that I had learned I could take and which pieces of it I needed to make my own and transition things. And that's when I got into my flow state. That's when business started coming to me and it felt like it was easy and it was fun and it was not like that uphill battle that I was in and that, before when I was doing things in ways that didn't feel like they were the right thing for me. So that was, I think, probably one of the first times and that was in my mid 20s, I guess, at that point. So it took me a little while. I'm sure I probably have some other times, but
I
that,
think that what you're pointing to is that when you can define what that is for yourself, then you can own it. And it's the same thing with what I call a flow strategy. It's my belief that each person has their own unique way of getting into flow. Yes, we might have some similarities to other people, but it makes the most sense to you, and you're going to use your own words to describe it. And when you can define your unique way of getting into flow, not only can you repeat it, right? Because if you can experience it, there's a saying in my book. Let's see if I can remember it. It's if you can dream it, you can be it. But if you can experience it, you can repeat it. And so, how do you increase the amount of time you spend into flow? Well, you have to figure out what is your unique way of getting into flow. And that will give you the entry point into getting into it over and over and over and over again. So, what I'm wondering, Darlene, is you told me about finding your flow. And it doesn't matter when this is, but I had a vivid memory. I gave you two. One was, the family the snowman. The other one was me in my room at 15, right? Um, I can, give you one from yesterday as well, right? So, can you think of a vivid time, when you have vivid memory of when you were in flow?
Hmm. The thing that's popping in my mind right now was a couple of summers ago, I was struggling with feeling creative. And I remember going out in my backyard and sitting in my lounge chair. It wasn't too warm. It was like still kind of cool and crisp in the morning. And I had like this massive download. And I started creating for my newsletter list for my business. It was called Poolside Muses. And it's because I just felt so in flow, sitting outside, like sitting in nature, being outdoors, the fresh air. We had just put a pool in, so like the backyard atmosphere
Okay.
changed a lot, and there
So
was
let,
like a lot
all
of
right.
creativity from in that space.
Okay. So I'm holding up for those of you who are listening, I'm holding up a picture that says where, what, why. And these are the three prompts that I use to help people to figure out their own unique flow strategy. So Darlene just explained her where. Sitting sitting in the lounge chair next to the pool, right? She even described the temperature of the air and where she was, okay? Um, so what you're doing um, is like, it's easier if I give you another example. So, for example, I worked with the chief operating officer of a medical center. Where she gets into her flow state the most is in her office. What she's doing, the what question is two parts. What are you doing on the outside? What are you doing on the inside? So what she's doing on the outside is having one-on-one conversations with people. That's when she gets into her flow state the most. Okay. And I'll share with you what she does on the inside in a second. So if you could describe, what were you doing when you were sitting next to the pool?
Mm. I was watching my kids as they were doing cannonballs and swimming laps and probably wrestling in the water, torturing each other.
Okay. So that's what you were doing on the outside.
Mhm.
Um, Now, what were you doing on the inside? I'll give you a couple examples first, like the woman I was just talking about. Where she is in her office. What she's doing on the outside is having one-on-one conversations with people. But what she's doing on the inside is she is putting aside her thoughts and deeply listening. If you ask my dad, where he is in the kitchen. What he's doing is cooking. What he's doing, that's what he's doing on the outside. What he's doing on the inside, he's basically pouring his love into the food, right?
Yeah.
He's also experimenting. He does a lot of different things when he's in the kitchen. Tinkering around could be any number of one of those words. So, does that help you to have an idea of what you were doing on the inside?
Yeah. I think I was being like just letting my like I wasn't trying to like force something at the moment. I was just kind of sitting there being relaxed. There was excitement happening around me. There was nature. No, that's not necessarily a what, but like it was like that atmosphere of
It's
just being, which sometimes when I'm
right.
trying to like work, I'm in work mode and I'm focused and I'm like trying to do the thing. But sometimes I know for myself, if I get outside of that, I get like,
Yes.
natural downloads will happen.
Yes. So the where for you, the environment is a big, I hate to use the trigger, but, and we'll use the word entry point into flow. Okay. For you, what you're doing is you are putting yourself in that environment,
Yeah.
right? And so you were, would you say you were surrendering to the environment?
Yeah.
Something like that?
That'll work. Yeah. Like,
Yeah, like letting go or whatever,
yeah,
relaxing
just,
into it. So I think that's what you were doing on the inside, something like that.
yeah.
Okay. And then, and I love that you use the word being because a lot of people say, when I'm in flow, I'm not doing, I'm just being.
Mhm.
And I think you intuitively picked up on that as well. And then when we ask the third question, which is why is it so meaningful? We're looking for why is it so meaningful for you? Okay. But we're looking for the highest values that are the things that are bigger than ourselves. So if I go back to our first example, the chief operating officer, where she is in her office. What she's doing on the outside is having one-on-one conversations with people. What she's doing on the inside is she's putting aside her thoughts and then she's deeply listening. And why it's so meaningful for her is that the deeper she listens, the deeper she connects, and connection is what touches her very deeply to the core.
Mhm.
So why is it so meaningful for you to be in that state that you described, in that environment where you're downloading that information, and why is that so meaningful?
Yeah. I think like I've always said my happy space is outside, like in nature. Like anytime I can be around water or just in like fresh air. One of my favorite things to do, and I don't actually do it in my backyard because we don't have a lot of grass, but like taking off my shoes and just like walking barefoot on grass
Mm-hmm.
is something like that deeply roots me in those
Mm-hmm.
moments. And so like being around the water, I think is part of it. And then like my kids bring me joy, but I think it's just like those little moments. I don't know if I'm going to the why spot though.
Why is things like joy, peace, love, self actualization, expansion, well being, equality, freedom, any of those kinds of words?
Mhm. I feel like I want to say yes to everything you just said. I'm like,
Yes.
that's just kind of like like who I am. Like you pretty much described me to a T right there. Diane. Like everything that's important to me, you just listed off. Like you didn't even know.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
So I think that having defined this for yourself, okay, we just use this as a lens to look through. What are you doing when you're in flow, right? And so, where are you? What are you doing on the outside? What are you doing on the inside, and why? Why is it so meaningful? This is my framework, and I have this on a spread, not a spreadsheet, a worksheet that I could share with everybody listening, so that you can figure out your own flow strategy. But having figured out your own flow strategy, how do you see yourself moving forward now that you've defined this for yourself?
I mean, when I'm stuck and not feeling like I can be productive or get things done, I go for a walk. I put myself out back on that lounge chair where I know like creativity will come. So for me, it's just like giving myself space to not feel like I have to sit at my office desk or go to my co-working. Like sometimes I'll go work at my co-working space, and that can be creative even for me, like putting myself in a different environment with different scenery, different sounds. Like the co-working space I go to, Herald has beautiful like fountains, so you can hear like the water trickling and different things like that. And it just gives
Hmm.
like the ambiance. For me, it's ambiance. Like I live in Temecula, California, and
Hmm.
I'll go to the winery
Okay.
and I don't, sometimes I partake and have a glass of wine, but oftentimes I'll just sit there and like, it's the atmosphere. It's the putting myself in an outdoor nature-y type of surrounding.
Okay. So, question for you: do you ever stop yourself from going outside or going to one of these places? Do you think, oh, that's unrealistic, or do you ever, or do you just always go like, oh, I'm stuck, go here, or like, because I think a lot of people deny themselves
Mhm.
the pleasure of being in flow.
Yeah.
There's a guiltiness to it, which, when we really talk about you being yourself, being your best self, because flow is when you do get into peak performance, and it is very creative and innovative. Um, and you're in that state. A lot of that has to do with saying yes to yourself, right? And carving out the time and knowing, okay, I'm stuck. I got really stuck on Monday afternoon. It was like ridiculous. I was in a downward spiral. I knew better. Seriously, all I needed to do was walk out the door and walk around the block, to shake it off, that kind of thing. So I'm just wondering if you have any insights from figuring out, that how important environment is for you.
Yeah. I think environment's hugely important for myself. And I even notice it now that we're having this conversation. Like I was making me think about like my kids when my son gets um upset or like he's not in the right headspace, like he needs to go outside. He needs to like run off his energy and go for a walk or like those different things. He plays soccer. And so like he lives on the soccer fields at least 4 to 5 days out of the week. And he like that's where he can kind of get into his flow state. And I think I would say I've gotten really good at noticing. I don't always push through and actually go do the activity outside or go do something differently. But I definitely would say over the years, like if you asked me this question 18 years ago, I probably would have, if you told me like, Darlene, we need you to put your newsletter out. Like I write my newsletter list every Wednesday. And sometimes I'll sit at this desk and I'm like, I have to have something creative. Like I'll just sit here and try to work through it. And I'm like stuck and it takes like 2 hours. And then the next week I'll get an idea while I'm out on a walk and I can write the
Yes.
newsletter in 30 seconds.
Yes.
I can take out my phone and like have it out and like I'm done. Like why do I torture myself sometimes and sit here for 2 hours when if I just
That's
get in my flow, Diane, I'm golden.
that's the insight that I was hoping that you would have,
Yeah.
because we all do that. I just said I did that on Monday, right? I was in a downward spiral and it was ridiculous. I didn't need to. I knew better. So, yes, I love that.
I have a question for you. So, like we know this, we're self-aware. Most of us are pretty self-aware. We know, or at least once we learn. So if someone's listening today and you just became like aha moment with Diane's example, and you're like, I do need to do things differently. I keep doing things the hard way. I want to do it more in a flow state. What would you say is like some of the first steps if somebody's like brand new to kind of identifying they want to find their flow?
Yes,
What do you recommend doing?
yeah, that was the right question to ask, because you do. I said at the beginning of the podcast, and I'll circle back to that. Flow falls under the umbrella of positive psychology. Positive psychology is all about taking a look at what's working well, reverse engineering that so that you can create more of that goodness in your life. So you do have to be able to recreate a memory of time when you were in flow first in order to reverse engineer it. And how do you know when you're in flow? It's those key indicators: losing sense of time, losing a sense of self, ideas and insights coming in from out of the blue, things come together with a sense of ease. When you're, instead of being in a negative feedback loop, like I was on Monday, right? And like what you were saying, sitting at the desk feeling tortured. That's a harsh word.
I felt that way in the moment.
Yeah. Instead, you're in a positive feedback loop where the more you get into it, the more you're getting out of it. And then overall, you're experiencing that feeling of being, right? And that freedom and joy and more meaning, right? So, so you have to first recognize when you are in flow. And I think just because I've identified it for you, I've given you the neuroscience of it, we've talked about it, it's a real thing. It is a flow, it is a mind state. It is not a mindset. Go with the flow is a mindset. And that's all about being easygoing. And also people say, I'm in my flow when their manifesting is like really, quick and easy. But I'm talking about, the positive psychology version of flow.
Yeah.
So recognizing that's just the first time. And we just gave you permission to be in that space, right? And so I think that's the second step. Like, okay, recognize when you're in it. Now let yourself breathe in it. And then once you have some vivid memories, you can use these prompts that I just walked you through, and then figure out, get really granular about it. So that you can, I have many different flow strategies. We don't just have one. I've got one for performing music. I've got one for writing music, right? I've got one for gardening. I've got one for when I'm doing, blog posts and things like that. So we have many different ways that we get into flow. I have another way
Can you show us?
too. Yes. So I would like to, everybody who's listening right now, I want to get you into flow right now. Okay. And here's how we're going to do it. I have recorded some music. I have a recording station behind me. I'm going to play the music. I'm going to clap to the music. I'm going to count you in. I want you to clap with me. Now, you might be in an environment where clapping, you with headphones on, wherever you are, driving or in the grocery store, whatever you are, clapping might not work for you in this moment. So you could tap your finger, do something, but you have to participate if you're going to experience flow. You can't listen to it from the outside. You actually have to get. So if you're unable to do it at this moment, just bookmark this and come back and do this with us, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a series of questions and challenges. And then afterwards, we're going to unpack it to see to what degree you may have been outer flow or in flow. Okay, make sense?
Yep.
So I'm just going to walk you through it. First, I have to do is just start the music. I just have to press a button back here. You able to hear that okay?
Yep.
Okay, so just listen. I'm going to clap by myself. Now I'm going to ask you to join me. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, ready, go. So keep clapping. I'm going to give you a challenge. I want you to deepen your focus. So all I want you to do is observe. Take your inner critic, put it over here, and just be neutral-minded and observe. Because you're clapping with the violin part. I want you to notice, are you clapping right exactly with the violin part, a little bit before or a little bit after? Keep your focus. Don't let it go. Even though I'm talking, I want you to keep noticing if you're with the violin a bit before or a bit after. Next challenge. I want you to nod your head with every other clap. Actually, I guess it's with each clap. Same thing, I want you to observe. Are you nodding exactly with the violin? A little bit before or a little bit after? Don't stop, keep your focus. Even though you're listening to this right now by yourself, there are thousands of other people doing this at not necessarily at the same time, but they're also doing this. And so I want you to think about each of you are doing your own part, but you're also doing it virtually, but you're doing it together. And we've all heard of the concept of oneness. And we are experiencing that through this exercise right now. Your last challenge. I'm going to play a melody you have never heard before. And I want you to end the song at the exact same time that I do. Awesome.
Wow. You play so beautifully.
Oh, thank you. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions. The first question is, did you lose a sense of time? And how would you know that? Did the experience we just did it go by fast? Or did it go by slowly, but in a good way? The next question is, did you lose a sense of yourself? Well, how would you know that? How loud was your inner critic? Was it really quiet, or was it kind of in and out, or was it screaming at you? Because basically, the quieter your inner critic was, the more in flow you were. That's a great key indicator. Did you find the added challenges satisfying in some sort of way? And when I mentioned that concept of oneness, did it take the experience to a whole new level? So according to psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, he did the most extensive research into flow. At the intersection of skill and challenge is the universal entry point into flow. So the skills we were just using were focus, deep listening, and clapping, right? Those are skills. Then the challenges were observe yourself. Where were you in relation to the violin part with your clapping and your head nodding? And how about ending the song at the same time, right? Those were the challenges. And then the concept of oneness, did you find that it took it to a whole new level? Because that was the purpose. So think about it. If you have a skill that's not challenged, nothing is going to ignite. If you have a challenge that's not skilled, nothing is going to ignite. It's the two together that ignites flow and brings out the best in all of us. And when you add purpose to that, it just takes everything to an entirely new level. So this is another model. If you envision a Venn diagram with 3 circles, skill, challenge, purpose, if you have each of these in play, you will increase your odds of getting into flow.
So good. I love it. I'm all about finding our flow and our harmony and doing things in a way that just feels darn good. That was a great experiment. I enjoyed like getting to partake in it on this side of it because I could feel myself like in the beginning, like you were talking about like with the inner critic. And at first I was like, all right, like am I even clapping on the right beat? What if the people watching this on YouTube later think like I'm off beat from where Diane was clapping, like, right? Because like I hear my own music in my own head, right? Like we all dance to a different
Right.
beat, like we hear different in those moments. And then as we got into it, like I didn't even think about it anymore. Like that was my first initial thought for a second. And then I got into that slow fate or that slow, the flow, I can't even say it, flow. Slowly I got into flow. I was
Yeah.
like blending those two words. And I just like got into my own little rhythm and I was closing my eyes and I didn't care what anybody else was doing or what any like
Yes.
that piece looked like. And then when you gave us that visual of like everybody was at home listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube and they were doing their own thing and but yet we were all together. Like that was just like a beautiful imagery of like how we can all be doing our own things and we can all still be like so similar and we're still so the same, even though we're doing it in different places. And so that was like a cool, like
To be
personal takeaway.
clear, we are using technology, and I don't know if the sound is syncing up at the same time as, it might look like you're clapping different than the music because we don't know how the electronics are syncing up, right? So I'll give you that. But when I think of this model, skill, challenge, purpose, volunteer work is a great example of it because you've got a group of people with a variety of skills. You've got a challenge that they're meeting, and it's all for a purpose. And in volunteer work, people say they find joy in doing their work. And so, how can you create that kind of experience in your daily life? I'll give you a really simple example. Like, I am not a procrastinator. I am not a procrastinator except for my email inbox. I have no idea why. Um, it's something I am way over skilled at handling. And so I will not really, until I challenge myself, I'll say, I'm going to get to the end of my email inbox by 10:30 this morning. And I usually don't worry about purpose because when I'm answering emails, I usually find purpose with connecting up with the different people along the way. I'm looking for purpose. And, there's something about setting that timeline as a challenge that just does it for me. Deadlines for some people, like if you ask me to write a new song and you give me a deadline, I will crumble. It does not work in that scenario. So, deadlines work as a challenge in some circumstances for some people, and in other circumstances, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Um, I speak for a lot of HR audiences, and this one woman, she said, learning a new skill is challenging, and purpose is what keeps you motivated. But once you have that skill honed, you've got to replan. You've got to find new challenges for it, and maybe even new purpose. So just use that as a lens to look through. If you're struggling with something, maybe you're over challenged. Maybe you need to break down the challenges into smaller pieces. Maybe you need more skills, right? How do you find the right mix of skill and challenge? It's that Goldilocks place that's
Yeah.
going to ignite flow. And are you working in purpose or have you forgotten about it, right? These are some ways that you can incorporate that.
Yeah. I love it. Diane, this is such a fun conversation. I just love the way that you're bringing the flow together, especially with your unique skills of being able to play the violin in such a beautiful way. Like I think it's unique. And
Thank
I
you.
love when we take like our gifted talents and like we find a way to like bring more purpose into what we're doing and how we're supporting people. We're going to go into rapid fire questions in just a second, but before we do, um, tell everybody like kind of what's going on, like what's next for you and like how you're showing up and helping support people with going into flow.
Oh, I am so excited. I have my book release is happening. Yay! On September 17th. You might be listening to this after the fact, but anyways, we will have in the show notes a link to my book. It's called Flow, Unlock Your Genius, Love What You Do, and it will take everything that we talked about today, on a whole deeper level, including how to lead yourself, how to lead other people, and a lot more about the background of why flow is so contagious and how you can impact other people by you being in flow. Um, there's a lot of, there's also all the things that we talked about today will also be in the book. So if you want to review. And then I have a gift as well. I have a beautiful web page set up with a download with outline of everything we talked about, as well as next steps, and 2 videos that support that information. So would love to gift that to people. And what's going on other than that is my fall speaking season is beginning, and I'm looking forward to getting out there, spreading the news, the message, and now being able to do that by having my audiences receive a book for themselves. I'm super excited to have that.
Yeah. There's nothing better than your own takeaway. You're like, got a book for the back room.
Yeah,
To the room. Come see me. So cool, Diane. Thank you so much for just giving us this gift of flow
thank you.
today. I
Thank you.
have a couple questions for you. So, what is your happy spot? Like if you do need to like reflect and recharge in those moments, and I know we talked a little bit about like this part of the flow, but like what's something that you like to do when you just need to like reset yourself each day?
Oh, yeah. I happen to live in a beautiful place, Bend, Oregon, and that would be my outdoor activities, which would be hiking, paddleboarding, or in the winter doing Nordic skiing.
Ooh, Nordic skiing. I'll have to
Yes, that's cross country skiing.
cross country. Okay. I was like, I don't know that terminology. That's fun though. And what's one of the books on your nightstand right now besides your own, which might not be there yet, but it's coming. What are you reading these days, or what type of things do you enjoy like when you just want to like have some growth or some new learning?
What is the, oh, it's Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart.
Mm. Such a good book. Love Brene. She's one of my favorites. Awesome. And if I could buy you a ticket to travel anywhere in the world today, where would you go and why?
Oh my goodness, are you kidding me? Where would I want to go? Oh, there's so many places. But the first thing that popped into my mind is I don't know what it is about the Mediterranean Sea.
Mm.
Um, I was there on the Mediterranean when I was in high school, but I haven't been back since. I don't know. There's something very magical about that water. So some destination point where I can experience that water.
Yeah, that sounds heavenly.
Mhm.
What does legacy mean to you?
Well, having just written a book, I will tell you, it's very interesting to have so much in your head and to be explaining it to other people is one thing, but to actually have it in a tangible thing, a tangible book, right? Um, I cannot tell you during the process of writing it how many times that brought tears. Actually seeing, okay, here they're coming right now. Actually seeing my content on paper. There is a woman who I coached her. She's retired, but she was a Yale law professor for many, many, many years. And when we were talking about flow, she had a flashback into her whole life and realized how much flow had gotten her through her entire career. And her letter that she wrote to me about that flashback is in my book. It's really powerful letter that she wrote. But the thing is that she said, now that I'm retired and I did write 2 books, I could see now that if I hadn't, I would feel like I didn't leave a legacy behind. It's like I would have, all of that work would become invisible. And so she said, I'm really glad that you wrote this book because it's really helped me a lot. And I know, it can really impact other people as well.
Yeah. So beautiful. Diane, thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing your gifts with us and your talents that are so cool to watch. Like, if you're watching or if you're listening to this, definitely go check out the YouTube video as well, because you get a chance to see Diane in her flow as she's playing for us there at that moment where you bring the violin back in. Definitely go get her book. We all need to go get it. I'm going to grab a copy as well. Download her free gift. We need to stay in flow. How do we find that flow? How do we get into that rhythm? Whether you're leading a team or you are running your business, flow is so important, as you learned today. Diane, thank you so much again for being on the show. Again, that's another episode of the Attract and Stand Out podcast. And remember, I believe in you. You're allowed to stand out. You're allowed to shine. You're allowed to be you. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.